guys, and welcome back to another episode of Next to Madison. Today we are talking about eggs. Not the eggs that you cook in your kitchen, but the eggs that you cook inside your body. We're particularly talking about fertility and freezing eggs, which I recently did, which was crazy, but I'm so happy I did it, and I'm so honored that my guest today is actually the woman that froze my eggs. So, I mean, I couldn't have a better expert here with me today. So, I would like to bring on my guest next to Madison, Dr. Fahimeh Sasan. How are you?
Good. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I still can't get over the fact that I did this. And you should be proud. You're the first podcast guest that has ever seen the inside of my vagina.
All right.
Yeah. I was like, wow, this is definitely my first podcast guest that has seen down below. So, yeah, tell us about this process. Like, I didn't have time to really do research. Somehow I was just kind of thrown into it, and I'm glad I did it. But for a woman who's thinking about this, like, kind of walk us through the process and like what is an age when a woman should say, okay, I should do this? Because 20s is too young, right?
Not necessarily. So just to backtrack a little bit, we're basically talking about women taking control of their future family lives, really being proactive about the kids you want to have, being proactive about that ideal family you aspire to have, or at the very least, giving yourself options to have the kids that you would like to have or not, but having more options than what was typically the natural thing was you just kind of cross your fingers and hope for the best, hope you meet the right person on time, hope your body doesn't fail you, hope that when the time comes you can have kids. That was kind of the standard. And then some women were able to conceive and some weren't. And then the ones that were not able to conceive, if they were wealthy enough, could afford really expensive fertility treatments, and then sometimes they would succeed and sometimes they would fail, but it was really not a lot of options. And so now, with kind of some of the most incredible advances that have been made in egg freezing and embryo freezing and in fertility, we're now giving women, for the first time really in the history of mankind, an option to be preventative about their fertility. So up until now, it was you kind of worked with what you had, and you hoped for the best. And what my goal, as the founding physician of KindBody, and what I think is really paramount is for women to at least learn more about their bodies. Yes. Whether or not a woman chooses to freeze their eggs like you did is obviously then your choice.
Yes.
And a choice that you should feel empowered about. But to answer your question about is it too young or too old, I think you're never too young or never too old to learn more about your fertility. And hence learn more about your body.
Because I remember when I came in with your business partner and I had met you and everything kind of happened so fast. And nobody knows if they're fertile until they try to get pregnant. Now, I've never been married and I haven't tried to have a baby. So, I didn't know. And you do a test called the
AMH. It's a blood test that gives us an estimation of ovarian reserve. And ovarian reserve, the reason why it's important is we as women are born with all the eggs we'll ever have. So we have about 2 million eggs at birth. And by the time we reach our first period, so for most girls, it's in their early teens. Some girls are early bloomers. So it's usually between 9 and, let's say, late bloomers, 15 years old. So by the time we reach our first period, we're already down to 300,000 to 400,000 eggs. So unfairly, we lose the vast majority of our eggs just in that first decade of our life. And then from there, each month, we lose up to 1,000 eggs. So all women will reach 0 eggs at some point in their life. And for the vast majority of women, that ends up being late 30s, early 40s.
Right.
The even sadder part, or maybe the even more unfair part, is 20% of women, which is a big percentage, can have a premature decline in their fertility under the age of 35.
Oh my gosh.
And there's no way to know it. And I think that's the part that that for me as an OBGYN is scary. And I think the part that most women have the hardest time kind of wrapping their head around is that you can't look at someone and tell them whether or not they're fertile. There's a lot of other things you could look at someone and say, oh, you look like you're in good shape. You must be healthy. You look like you work out. Good for you. You're not overweight.
Right.
Maybe your skin looks good. Whatever. There's a lot of things you can just by looking at someone, you could tell, or a doctor can do a physical exam and say, okay, everything looks healthy. But with fertility, you could be the picture of health. You could be exercising, eating well, perfect diet, no stress, whatever the case may be,
Right.
and still have poor fertility. Or vice versa, someone, not that I'm advocating not being healthy, but you could also be a very unhealthy person that has very good fertility. And so because it's not something we can control, because it's not something we can change, in that, a lot of other things, for example, you might go to the doctor and find out you have high cholesterol. So then you start dieting, you exercise, and then a year later, your cholesterol is better.
Right.
With fertility, if I tell you your egg count's low, there's nothing you can do to make it better. And so I think it's the key parts is it's not in our control. It declines with age. And there's no way to just look at someone and know whether or not they're fertile. And the combination of those things is why it makes it so paramountly important for women to be proactive and at least go in and have an assessment.
Right.
Now, whether or not you choose to take that extra step and freeze your eggs or freeze embryos if you're in a relationship is another topic and is an adjunctive topic. But I think at the very least, women, we owe it to ourselves as women to at least be preventative and go and have an assessment and find out where we're at.
Absolutely.
Especially if we desire to have children. And I would even argue, even if you don't think you ever want children, because what if you change your mind?
Mm-hmm. I remember when I got that test, it was kind of after I walked out of there, it was so nerve-wracking because at that moment I thought, oh my gosh, I could find out I'm infertile.
Right.
And all of a sudden, this isn't an option for me. And it was like a very difficult moment, but I'm glad I did it.
Right.
To know.
Exactly. And that's one of the most common things. And I'll kind of give you another way to look at that.
Okay.
A lot of women will say, well, I don't want to know because what if I find out bad news?
True.
So my flip to that would be, even if you had found out that your fertility was low, there's usually still options to freeze eggs. You may not get as many eggs. We may need to do it more than once.
Right.
But it's very rare that we tell someone, you don't have any eggs and there's no options for you. It's typically, oh, your egg count is lower than I would expect for a fill-in-the-blank year-old. But let's go ahead and do this, and we can still do this. We may have to do it a couple of rounds to get an adequate number of eggs. But, in women that are under the age of 40, even if we find out they have premature ovarian failure, which means premature infertility, we still have lots of options.
Oh, and you think they're going to be getting even more advanced, obviously?
We're really at the peak. I mean, obviously, there's always going to be advances. I think more of the advances will be in genetic research and genetic testing.
Right.
But as far as like how proficient we've come in freezing eggs and maturing and all that maturation process, I think we're really at a very good place. I mean, who knows? Obviously, there can always be advances, but
I'm waiting for the baby in the incubator. That's what I want. You don't have to grow it. You just put it in the incubator, and 9 months you pick it up. Well, that's what I'm waiting for.
It's called a gestational carrier. You can pay for that.
I know, but it comes with a human, and you don't know what they're eating. And
True.
they're probably more expensive, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, and that's another option. And that was the thing when I got my eggs out. I was like, oh gosh, my career's got to take off because now I wouldn't have to carry this baby. Like that's the nice thing about the eggs being out of you. So the whole process, though, I think people are like, what is it? What's it going to do to my body? Let's talk about that. Because that was pretty intense.
Right.
Because I went from complete fear of needles to bring it on. Yeah. My fear of needles is over.
Isn't that empowering, though?
Yeah.
Imagine, like, your entire life, and I remember how scared you were of the needles, even just getting your blood drawn.
Yes.
Like, you even told me, I'm not listening to you anymore because I'm so freaked out about getting my blood drawn. So I think this process, we talk a lot about at KindBody, and if you look at our brand and on Instagram, we talk a lot about empowerment.
Yeah,
and it's not just kind of to say it because it's a sexy word.
Right.
I really do think this process is empowering for women because look at you, like
absolutely,
the whole process was 2 weeks. I mean, I know it feels sometimes like it's an eternity, but it was 2 weeks, and during those 2 weeks, you did about 11 days of injections, and over that time, just 10 days. I mean, think about any other fear that you have. I guarantee you didn't get over it in 10 days.
No.
Right? Like, think about anything. You fear of heights, fear of whatever.
Right.
And so I think it's the process of doing something yourself, like giving yourself the injections, which now I'm sure you see, they were smaller than you maybe thought, things like that.
Oh,
but I think
so
it's
easy.
Going through it and knowing that you're doing it for a purpose.
Exactly.
Knowing that I'm doing this, and yes, I hate needles, but I'm going to do this because I'm making an investment in my future. All of a sudden, that's where that empowerment comes in. That's like, you're not just willy-nilly doing it for because it's a fad, but it's an investment in your future. Granted, it's not a guarantee for your future, but it's an investment in your future. And I think for most women, once they get past the first injection, or maybe the second injection, they're like, okay, I got this. All right. And then your body starts telling your brain, wait, this isn't as bad as you thought.
No.
And then by the time you're almost through, you're like, hey, who needs an injection? I can give you an injection. Anybody need an injection? And now you probably could teach someone else how to do it because you did it yourself.
It was like nothing.
Exactly. And just to backtrack for your listeners, so egg freezing is a process by which we're giving you hormones. It's the same hormones your brain naturally releases to your eggs each month. The way it works is each month our body matures one egg. That one mature egg is matured through the process of hormones that go from the brain to the ovary. The one mature egg in your body naturally is the one that could become fertilized with sperm if you had sex. That then becomes a baby. What we're doing with egg freezing is we're helping a group of eggs, not just one, all mature simultaneously with the help of injections that are the same hormone your brain makes. And all they're doing is helping your eggs mature. We're not making new eggs. We're not making more eggs. We're not changing your eggs in any way except we're helping them get mature. And so that's why it's typically well tolerated in that, yes, you were nervous, and yes, you got bloated, and you probably felt more tired than usual, and you may have felt emotional before, after, things like that.
Yeah.
But it's not some it's a hormone that your body is familiar with. Your body has had this hormone in it on a regular basis. Now, granted, we're giving it to you at a higher level, hence some of the changes, but it's really well tolerated because it's not something all of a sudden that your body's like, wait, what is this? What are you giving me? It's something your body has experienced your whole reproductive life.
So when was the first egg freezing done? Do you know?
The first egg freezing, so it was actually a fun fact, our chief medical officer, who's Dr. Lynn Westfall, she was previously at Stanford University in California, was actually one of the first doctors in the United States to freeze eggs through the Stanford program.
Wow.
At the time, it was experimental. It was in the early 1980s, I believe, late 70s, early 80s, for a young girl who had cancer. And so they went through a whole experimental protocol and got it passed through the powers that be. You have to go through Stanford University and FDA and all this stuff because whenever you're using something for the first time.
Right.
In an effort to freeze eggs for this young girl who had cancer because she wanted to freeze eggs before she got chemotherapy because chemotherapy will kill your eggs and can damage your ovaries permanently. Yeah. And so she's our chief medical officer. So we have a really incredible team behind KindBody that has really been doing this at the forefront from the beginning. But
so it's really not that old. It's pretty new.
If you think about fertility as a whole, I mean, now through IVF. So IVF is the process where you actually fertilize eggs with embryos. Fertilize eggs with sperm, and make embryos, and then you transfer an embryo into a uterus. But the initial process of IVF is the same as egg freezing. So just like you went through...
So I've done the hardest part.
You've done the hardest part because the rest of it will be done in the lab. So if and when you're ready to use your eggs would be thawed. So they're already out of your body. There's nothing you need to partake in. Your eggs would be thawed by an embryologist. Sperm would be introduced. So it could be a sperm donor. It could be your future husband, boyfriend. Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Those eggs would then be fertilized. We watch them grow for 5 days. On the 5th day, we can actually biopsy the embryo genetically to make sure it's normal.
Okay.
And then once we've confirmed that it's a genetically normal embryo, then we would transfer the embryo back in your uterus to grow. And that's the completed IVF process. So egg freezing is just you decided, I'm not ready to be pregnant now.
Right.
So we pressed pause and said, okay, so we'll thaw them and fertilize them when you're ready. But in a person who's going through IVF, the same day your eggs were extracted, they would have been fertilized with sperm. So it's
then
literally
put right
the
back
same
in?
thing. No, you have to wait the 5 days to make the embryo and then genetically test the embryo. So putting it back in ends up typically being the next month.
So the other thing you hear about is you see a lot of twins because
of IVF.
Right. So why do certain women put in more than one? Like, do they usually not take and then they do? I know somebody who put in 4 and they all took.
Right. So that's older. I bet the person who did that, it's not recent.
No.
Yeah. So what used to happen was that doctors would get embryos.
Okay.
And we didn't have any way of testing the embryos, meaning we, the scientific community.
Okay.
All we saw was, okay, these are embryos. And you knew inherently based on our scientific knowledge that some of those embryos were going to be normal. Mm-hmm. And genetically normal, and some were going to be genetically abnormal.
Okay.
Genetically abnormal embryos will typically lead to miscarriage. Genetically normal embryos take, meaning become a pregnancy.
Okay.
But since we couldn't check and we knew some of them were going to be abnormal, the way that fertility doctors used to do was, all right, let's just put them all in, hope one's good. And then unfortunately, sometimes they would all be good. And then people would have quadruplets, triplets, or Octomom, remember her? And she had a whole show.
So that was an in vitro thing?
Those are all fertility treatments. Yeah. And so now, fast forward to our current technology, in 2019, the standard is now to only transfer 1 genetically normal embryo. And that's true across the United States. So
if somebody wants twins, though,
it's not recommended anymore.
Okay.
So now the standard is because we can do genetic testing, now we confirm that this is a genetically normal embryo. The standard has now become 1 uterus, 1 baby. Mm-hmm. And the reason why we don't recommend twins, even if a couple just personally desires it, is that twin pregnancies have a higher risk of miscarriage, have a higher risk of preterm labor, have a higher risk of preterm delivery, have a higher risk of having a baby or babies that need to be in the neonatal ICU, higher risk of vision problems and hearing loss. So there's a lot of risks that come with being born premature.
So we're definitely going to see a decrease in twins.
100%. So those twins that you see, or if you have friends who have triplets and quadruplets or whatever, are really going to be from the early, certainly from 1980s, 1990s, and early 2000s.
Okay.
Within the last 5 years, anyone who's had IVF, the vast majority of them would have had just 1 embryo.
So if you have eggs that are out, I won't release how many eggs I got, I'll keep that private, but so those eggs that were matured, we won't know if they're good until they're fertilized. So is it my body that's not going to take it, or could I get the sperm person tested beforehand before they mess up your eggs?
That's a great question. And the key is that we can't test eggs for their genetics, and we can't test sperm for genetics.
Oh.
Because each one are an egg is a solitary cell. So if you tried to biopsy one cell, it would destroy the cell because it's just one unit.
Right.
And similarly with sperm. So the only time we can check either is once they've come together, fertilized, and created an embryo. So only embryos can be genetically tested. You can't test genetically eggs or sperm. You can see if a person is a carrier. So we can test any couple or any woman to see, do you carry any diseases? Are you a carrier for cystic fibrosis? Are you a carrier for a breast cancer gene? Are you a carrier for a plethora of genes that we can test for?
Okay.
But we can't tell you if your egg is going to make a genetically normal baby until it's created an embryo.
Which is why you want as many eggs as you guys
Precisely.
can get.
So it's never a 1-to-1 ratio. 1 egg does not equal 1 baby. If that was the case, literally the human population would be 100 times more than it is. And every woman, every time she had sex, would be pregnant, and there would be a lot more issues.
Right.
In the world.
Yeah, that would not be that'd be a crazy world.
Yeah. And that's why if you really look at it, in women who are in their 20s and early 30s who are fertile, our chances of getting pregnant each month are only 25%.
Yeah.
It's low. It's lower than people think, because for some reason people think there's a 100% fertility rate, and no one's 100% fertile.
So let's talk about pull-out babies, because I have a couple of friends that are 2 actually that I can think of, 2 guy friends that were 3. I pulled out.
Yeah. And
I
then she
didn't even ejaculate in
Yeah,
her.
absolutely. Well, that's because in the pre-ejaculate, so, here we're both adults. So,
Yeah.
when you think about ejaculation, most people think of kind of the bigger mass of seminal fluid that comes out and it's white and gooey and whatever. But sperm can actually be released in what's called pre-ejaculate. Because remember, sperm are microscopic. It's not like you can see them.
True.
And so you can actually, that's why the withdrawal method is not considered a good form of contraception, is that you can actually have sperm released in the it's called pre-seminal fluid.
Like pre-cum?
Precisely.
Right, is the generic term.
Exactly. And so that's why withdrawal method's not considered a good form of contraception.
Right.
Or if you are going to do withdrawal method, you should do it in combination with, for example, someone who's really got a good predictable cycle, and that you're not only avoiding their ovulatory or their fertile days, but you're also doing that with a combination of withdrawal method. But either way, if someone really does not want to be pregnant, there's much better forms of contraception to use.
Right. No, and that makes sense. I have a friend who, she was older. She's just had 2 babies, didn't do any of the egg freezing or anything. She was very lucky.
Yeah.
And she used birth control. She used a thermometer as birth control. Can you explain, like, apparently our bodies get hotter?
Yeah. So there are women who choose to use what are called more natural family planning tools. And now we've gotten fancy. There's like apps where if you put a good 6 months worth.
I have one.
Yeah. So exactly. So if it's the only key thing for your listeners is that you really have to have a predictable cycle in order for the apps to work. If your period comes vastly differently every month, like
if it's just one day off?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm talking about people who, like, sometimes I get my period every 30 days. Sometimes I get it every 60 days. Sometimes I get it 45 days.
Oh, gee, yeah.
Like, if you have that kind of irregularity, clearly the app can't figure out what's going to happen. No. It's people who say every month, every 28 days or every 28 to 30 days I get a period. Then the apps can be helpful. But what you can do is the thermometer test is that you get around the time of ovulation, you'll get an increase in your temperature. I'm not talking you get a fever. Like, you wouldn't notice it. But if you start tracking your temperature through a month, let's say you start tracking it at the first day of your period, and then you track it throughout the month, around the time of ovulation, you'll see a slight peak in your temperature, and then it'll go back down. And so people who want to use the natural contraception method will avoid sex when their temperature starts to peak. Okay. And then we'll resume sex once their temperature has gone back down to normal, for example.
So it's not as easy to get pregnant as some younger people think.
No. I think that's probably the biggest unfairness of this whole situation, is that I think we spend as women kind of a huge chunk of our lives desperately trying to not get pregnant.
Right.
When you're in college and when you lose your virginity and what other fun times that we have in our lives. And that's all we're really ever taught too. Sex ed from our parents is always kind of, these are your techniques of not getting pregnant. Use condoms. And a lot of it is good information. I mean, yes, we need to protect ourselves against STDs, HIV, gonorrhea, chlamydia. And so that's all good information, but no one really tells us, okay, at some point though, when you want to actually get pregnant, depending on your age, it might be hard. Depending on certain things, it might be hard. And so because no one ever talks about those things, we feel like I'm going to get pregnant if I sit on the toilet, Right. Unfortunately. So
are they changing the sex education in schools?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I actually think most schools don't even have sex education anymore.
Really? Isn't that crazy?
It's really sad. I mean, I think that's just a whole problem with our education system. Right. The same way that, we're going away from music education and all of that. So I think that, and that's why, I felt so passionately about our mission at KindBody, was we really wanted to improve access. And when I say improving access, sure, brick and mortar is important, giving women a place to go, but also just giving access to the information. So for women to understand that, a biological clock is a real thing, that your fertility does decline with age, that, it's not just your aunt so-and-so nagging you at Christmas time about when are you going to give me a grandbaby, and that it is a real thing, and also that miscarriage is real, that having difficulty conceiving is real, and it doesn't mean you failed as a woman. It doesn't mean that you are somehow inadequate, that these are just natural things that occur. And the more we inform ourselves, the more information is out there that, women and men can be more aware of. I think it just empowers us with choices. And I'm certainly not here to say that every woman that exists should freeze their eggs. I think it's an option that every woman should have.
Yeah.
But I think depending on your life goals, is you may also turn around when I met you and said, okay, fine. If I don't end up having kids, it's okay. I'll adopt. And I'm perfectly fine with that. And I would have been like,
I did say that.
And I would have been like, good for you. I mean, awesome. Yeah. There's so many children in the world that need to be adopted. Yeah. But on the flip side, some people are like, no, it's really important for me to have a biological child of my own.
Or at least one of my own.
Precisely, yeah, because reproduction and our desire to have biological children is something that I think transcends cultural boundaries. It transcends socioeconomic boundaries, whether you're rich, you're poor, you're homosexual, you're asexual, you're African American, you're white, you're Hispanic, whatever the case may be. It's a universal desire to procreate.
Right.
Or at least have the option of that. And I think it's particularly strong for women as kind of our instinctual desire to have children.
Oh, absolutely. Who's going to take care of us when we're old? Exactly. That's no guarantee, but.
And I think men have those same desires. I do think it's different for men and women. And I think that leaving it up to chance, especially since our society has changed so much. I mean, if you look at across the world, women are waiting longer to have children, whether it's because of career or economics or because we're waiting to meet the right person. We're not getting married when we're teenagers. When you look back at like our grandparents, it was very standard that you kind of got married out of high school, like your college sweetheart, or what is it, high school sweetheart.
High school, yeah.
And then you had a baby when you were in your 20s. You had grandbabies by the time you were 40, and that was it. And everybody's happy. But and now, for great, and I think it's a wonderful thing. But like women are aspiring higher education. Women are reaching really new heights in their careers. But also just people are waiting to meet the right person. And sometimes you think it was the right person and it turned out to be definitely not the right person. Yeah. And divorce is a real thing. And all of these factors play in. And as women are waiting longer to have children, unfortunately, our fertility isn't catching up with the changes in the times.
Right.
And so I think we just need to be aware of our fertility and then know our options. So just because life hasn't turned out some cookie cutter way, whether it's right or wrong, we should at least have options to have, the family of our dreams.
Yeah. And you could think about it this way. You are preventing women from settling.
Yeah. There you go.
That is amazing. That is very empowering.
Yeah.
Because a lot of women would say, oh my gosh, I'm out of time, and just pick John or Jack off the street.
Sure.
And that's when a lot of problems can arise.
Absolutely.
So this is kind of at least giving the power to say, you know what, I'm going to make sure this is right.
Exactly.
So when do you become too old to use your eggs?
So in the United States, the governing body for kind of all of the evidence that comes in and the evidence-based medicine that we use is under the American Society for Reproductive Medicine.
Okay.
It's called ASRM is the acronym. And the recommendation that they give, which is what we use at KindBody as well, is the 55 is the cutoff.
Okay.
So let's say a woman freezes her eggs when she's in her 20s or 30s or whenever, that you can, if you're healthy, clearly not every 55-year-old is suitable to be pregnant, but if you're healthy and you don't have any contraindications, then up until the age of 55, we could transfer back an embryo that would then you could carry. And there's evidence to show that, you can have a healthy pregnancy. There's more risks involved.
Right.
And it uniquely depends on the woman. So I'm certainly not advocating that every everybody in their 50s should be pregnant.
Right.
The same way as there's some 30-year-olds who aren't healthy enough to be pregnant, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So it depends, obviously if you have high blood pressure, diabetes, other medical issues, if you're on certain medications, those may put you at risk where it's not healthy enough for you to be pregnant.
Okay.
But for example, I delivered a 52-year-old woman a few years back who had a donor egg and donor sperm that she'd made into an embryo that she carried through a healthy, 9-month pregnancy. And she didn't have any problems. But she went into it understanding that I might get diabetes of pregnancy. I might have high blood pressure of pregnancy. She knew she was a high-risk pregnancy, and we did a lot of extra monitoring, but she did great. And so I think it's you have to cherry pick your older women.
Okay.
And really make sure that they're under the good supervision.
Right.
But the cutoff is 55.
Okay, which would kind of make sense. You probably don't want somebody in their 80s carrying.
Right. So there was I saw it on YouTube or something. There was recently in India, a couple the woman was in her 70s and a fertility doctor, but this is all very bad medicine, got her pregnant. She ended up delivering preterm twins and then went to the ICU and got very sick. I haven't followed up to what happened to her, but she got extremely sick. It's not a healthy that old. And also, I think if you think about it, step back for a moment, I hope for most people having a kid isn't just about having the kid. You'd want to watch them grow and be around to reach their milestones and be able to enjoy them.
People starting to give birth to their own grandbabies.
Yeah.
My kids won't get it together.
Yeah.
So.
No, so I think there's some ethical things to think about
as
women get older. So 55, I think, is a supportive, and it's just recognizing that it's a few 55-year-olds that would meet criteria. Certainly not everyone who is in their 50s would be considered a suitable candidate.
Okay.
And it's typically, even though there's a lot of changes going on in our society, it's still typically women in their 30s and 40s who want to be pregnant anyway.
Right.
So it's not a
true.
problem you're running into on a daily basis by any means.
Right. So let's talk about donor eggs because a woman might go and have this AMH test done and find out that they're infertile at this point. So to still provide them with hope, that's why there is the donor egg. So can you kind of go around the cost of some of this So
the process of donor egg means that you are going to get eggs from another woman. Typically, and I won't say all the time, but typically donors are usually under the age of 30.
Okay.
Because if you're going to go about getting a donor egg, you want to get the best genetic quality egg. And we know that younger the egg is, the better the genetic quality of the egg. I'm not talking about how pretty they are or any of that. So, so donors are usually under 30, although they can be older. And there's donor agencies, the same as there's a lot of people are familiar with sperm donors.
Yes.
So, not to oversimplify it, but it is very much like Match.com or any dating app. It is. You put in your criteria. So whether you're looking for an egg or a sperm, so you would sign up for the company.
Okay.
There's donor agencies that have both eggs and sperm. Some agencies have both.
Okay.
But you would put in your criteria, I want it to be my same ethnicity, maybe your same race. You can do height because, if you're tall and you want to have a tall baby, whatever, right? So there's specifications.
Just kind of be like you.
So you can put in your height, you can put hair color, eye color. You can put, that you want someone that doesn't have a family history of cancer. You can even do genetic screening. So if you're a carrier for a certain disease, you would say, I want to make sure the donor is not a carrier for that disease.
Okay.
Because within a lot of these genetic diseases, both the man and woman have to be carriers for the same disease in order to pass it on to a child.
Oh, interesting.
So you can pick your ideal egg or sperm donor based on just lots of characteristics, the same as you would pick a partner.
Okay.
And then the agency will find you. Sometimes they already have it in their bank.
Okay.
Meaning okay, this person meets your criteria. You can see pictures,
right.
And all that, because it would be important for most people to know what the egg donor or sperm donor looks like, because obviously physicality is an important part of all of this. And you can know IQ, what their job is, what level of education they achieved. I mean, you can get as thorough as you want to be.
Right.
Because it's a big decision. Obviously, this is going to be your child.
Absolutely.
And then once you put in all of your criteria, then they will tell you, we have in our bank, these are 3 options, and then you can pick which one you want, or 5 options or whatever.
Okay.
And then you, once you've picked them, then you basically buy the egg.
And how much is
buy
a
the
typical?
sperm. So for donor egg, it's about $15,000. It's expensive, whereas sperm is a couple $100.
What? 15,000 for one egg?
They usually send you a batch of eggs. It's not per egg.
Oh, okay. I was like,
It's not per egg, because one egg doesn't equal one baby.
Right.
So they usually are sending you batches of eggs, and it's all from the same person, because you want. So that way, if you make more than one embryo, like let's say you want to have 2 kids.
Yes.
It's a batch of eggs. I'm not exactly sure how many eggs come in a batch, but it's not for one egg. I do want to clarify that.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. And then sperm is so cheap.
Sperm is so cheap because men release at least 20 million sperm per ejaculate. So, and the egg freezing, and basically you're paying, you went through the process now, it's 2 weeks, it's the injections, all that stuff. So you're basically paying for the whole process that this woman went through.
You're right. Plus the emotional
Right.
stuff.
So she had to give herself injections. So it's paying for the medicine. It's paying for the process, the anesthesia, all of that.
Plus some money.
And then money. So people get paid to be egg donors, just like people get paid to be sperm donors. But because sperm is so easy and...
I know. They got to just go look at a nudie magazine and call it a day.
Exactly.
Oh,
exactly. So just because sperm is so plentiful and so non-invasive to get, it's cheaper.
Okay.
Whereas eggs, it's more of a process to extract. It's more expensive.
Right. No, that makes absolute sense. So if you're a fertile woman and you just want a sperm donor, it's a couple $100.
Yeah. Exactly.
Is it like a turkey baster kind of?
You can.
Same thing?
You can do that. So so there's 2 ways. If you get donor sperm, there's 2 ways that you can do it. So there is a way where you can get the sperm literally shipped. So same thing, you go through a Rolodex, you fill out all your criteria, everything we just went through, and then they'll give you 5 options. You pick the one you want, and then they'll send it to you. Literally, you can get it sent to your house. And you can, which some same-sex female couples will do this, or you can do it as a single woman, and you can use a turkey baster. Because remember, what are we doing? Yeah, because what are we doing with sex? All you're doing is depositing sperm into the vagina.
Yes.
Right? And then the sperm finds its way. If we want to be more exact, we can do an intrauterine insemination where the doctor actually injects the sperm into the uterus.
You can take an actual turkey baster out of your kitchen.
Yep.
Suck up the sperm that's like in a jar.
Yeah, and put it in your vagina.
And then shove it and squeeze it.
Precisely.
I always thought that was like a joke.
No, because if you think about, what is sex, right? They're just ejaculating sperm into your vagina.
But doesn't if the sperm hits the air, it kills it? No. So how do they deliver it? Isn't it like a sealed jar?
Yeah, no, and it's all temperature regulated, and you can't get extreme temperatures and all that stuff. It's properly delivered to you. They don't like. It's not coming with the mailman,
right? Okay, right.
Yeah, no, it's all temperature. It's all temperature regulated and all of that.
And you actually take a turkey baster.
You can,
and you suck it up. That is hysterical.
You can. That's kind of like if you're just young and totally fertile and you have no problems and all you're missing is the sperm. A lot of people who use sperm donor will end up doing intrauterine insemination. So then that process, you're preparing the woman so that the insemination is occurring at the exact moment where there's an egg ready to be received.
Okay.
So you time the ovulation either with medication or naturally, and then you come in and you get the sperm and we inject it into the actual uterus, not in the vagina.
Okay.
With a little catheter. And that's called intrauterine insemination. Instead of putting it in the vagina, we're actually putting it all the way up in the uterus. And that can improve the success of a pregnancy. Okay. Even in couples who have a man and woman couple and they're having difficulty conceiving, sometimes a first step before you do IVF can be just called intrauterine insemination.
And what's a typical cost for that?
It's about well, the prices in this industry, the prices can be crazy because people just for the longest time charged whatever they wanted because it was predominantly for high socioeconomic and people got away with like egg freezing. There's places in New York that charge $17,000 excluding the medicine for egg freezing.
Oh my gosh.
And so for intrauterine insemination at KindBody, it's $2,500.
Okay, so still expensive, but affordable.
Yeah, and that includes the monitoring, making sure the insemination's done at the appropriate time, and then preparing the sperm and inserting it into the uterus, which is a procedure.
So let's talk about the sperm, since we're on that. You hear these stories where a guy's just gone into the spank bank and donated all this sperm, and then there's like 100 babies. There was a movie on it.
Yeah.
How are they preventing that from happening? Because the concern, which I'm sure people have, is how do you prevent relatives from meeting in the future and all of a sudden you've got genetically, because they're the same dad.
Yeah. No, I believe, and I'm certainly not an expert in sperm banks, but I do believe now they're tracking that, like how many times have you donated sperm and really keeping a better track of it. I think there was a period of time where nobody was regulating it and people just donated it. And and you can also, so that you can, as one of the criteria, you could actually, pick that the sperm donor is only used by you and that no other samples would be provided and all of that stuff, because there are people who only do it once.
Okay.
But I am not I can't speak to the new regulations specifically of how to prevent that, but I do know that you can ask, like, how many times has the sperm donor donated?
Right, because I think there's a lot of guys. I know my brother used to go to get some extra beer money when he was in college.
I'm confident that the regulations on it have increased.
Okay, good.
I wouldn't be able to talk specifics about it, but I'm sure they've increased. And I think you can ask too, like, how many times has this person donated and things like that.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, I want to bring up the Kardashians because she had 2 real babies and she had 2 surrogate babies.
I mean, they're all real babies.
Well, okay, not that. Okay. Doctor, they're all real babies, right? But like she had 2 on her own and then 2 through another. So she took the eggs out, right? But isn't there a thing where you can genetically make your baby if you have the sperm and the egg? Like you can be like, I only want a girl.
Sure. Yeah. It's not that you're genetically making it. It's once we do genetic testing. So when we fertilize an egg with sperm and we make an embryo, then we can genetically test the embryo to see if it's genetically normal. And part of our genes, so we have 46 chromosomes as humans, as healthy humans. We get 23 of those chromosomes from the egg, 23 chromosomes from the sperm. So together it's 46. And one of our chromosomes is our sex chromosome. So when we do genetic testing, we can tell a couple, okay, this is a genetically normal female. This is a genetically normal male.
The embryo.
Yeah. And then we can even then take it a step up and say, this is genetically normal and you're a carrier for breast cancer. This embryo is not a carrier for breast cancer. So the genetic testing, whether it's boy or girl, is like the easiest part of it. We can actually take it even up a notch and actually look for diseases, which has been a huge advance because there's people who are carriers where the man and woman are both carriers for a disease where now there would be a significant chance of that child being affected.
Yeah.
So you can actually prevent disease. But yeah, some people do IVF purely for gender selection, meaning they only want a boy. Like they have 2 girls and they're like, we're having one more pregnancy and the only reason we're here is because we want a girl.
Yes.
And they're actually totally fertile. Like they could get pregnant on their own. And people do that and it's fine. I mean, I don't have any objections.
Right. No, it's so interesting though. And so what happens to because remember Sofia Vergara and her ex-boyfriend Nick Loeb, they had made embryos, and then now I don't know if it's over, but there was a fight for these because he wanted them.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why more and more women are now freezing eggs as opposed to freezing embryos, because an egg is yours. I mean, it's just an egg. It's yours. There's no ethical dilemma. It's clearly yours.
Right.
And an egg is not an embryo. So if someone wants to get really philosophical or ethical about it, you're not worried about discarding life. It's just an egg.
Yes.
It's just a cell. Embryos, on the other hand, technically belong to both the man and woman. I mean, they're half his, half yours. And so if you do get divorced, one, you now have embryos that are the person you're exiting a relationship from.
Right.
And two, you can't unfertilize them. So you can't like, oh, that didn't work out. All right, let's go back. Let's unfertilize them and go back to the egg stage. And so a lot of people have to think about that. And I think it's becoming a reality we have to think about, because as more and more women want to preserve their fertility, we caution even married couples, if they're trying to preserve their fertility, that sometimes people will freeze half eggs, half embryos.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Just so you have an option. I'm not trying to be a pessimist, but divorce is a real thing.
You're just being realistic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, but that's why it's really important to have legal documents.
So what happens to the embryos that aren't used?
So embryos that are not used, or eggs that aren't used, either way. They're yours. Theoretically, you could put in your will that I want them to be around forever. I mean, technically you can, so long as you continue to pay for their storage.
Wow.
You could keep eggs frozen or embryos frozen for eternity. Most places have clauses in them that upon your death, they'll be discarded. And most people want that because it's kind of weird and narcissistic to want.
Yeah, to keep it around. Right.
But at some point, a person may typically you reach a certain age that you're like, okay, I'm not going to use these anymore. Or you reach a certain number of kids where you're like, all right, now I have 3 kids. I'm good. I have 3 kids. I'm 45. The kitchen's closed. Right. And then you would just contact your fertility center. So you would contact us at KindBody and say, okay, I don't want to freeze my eggs or embryos anymore. And they can be discarded, or you can donate them for scientific research. So
can you donate them to a couple in need?
You can't donate the regulations are different from state to state.
Okay.
In New York State, if you have a desire to be able to donate them to another person in the future, you have to have, at the time you froze your eggs or embryos, have done some extra testing. So it's not something you can decide after the fact. Other states have regulations where you can, but in New York, it's very strict. So if you want the intention to be able to donate them to a third party in the future, prior to freezing your eggs, you have to go through extra screening for STDs and things. Gotcha.
Okay. And then what about, because the world is getting crazy, so do not judge me when I say this. No. There's stem cells in those eggs. If a woman chooses not to use those eggs, could she have them put into skincare?
Oh, I'm sure you could. Sure. I'm
somewhere in Hollywood, something's going on here. Right?
That's what I'm saying. One of the options is you can donate them for research. So at this point, that kind of thing would be research.
Okay.
But yeah, so you can, 2 things. Right now, it's 3 things. If you did the appropriate testing, you can donate them to another woman or couple. Or you can discard them, where they would just be thrown away. They're microscopic. There's really very minimal waste.
Right.
Or 3, you can donate them to research. So in this case where you're talking about stem cell, that would be research.
Okay. Because a lot of skincare companies are now doing stem cells.
Yeah. So that would be research. I mean, it's still in the research phase.
So do you think one day we might see unused eggs in our skincare?
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, anything is possible. People
is it the fountain of youth?
Yeah, no. I mean, people draw their blood and plasma and inject it into their skin, so I don't see why not. But
I know.
Umbilical cord is very rich in umbilical cord blood.
Yes.
Has a lot of stem cells, so people do that a lot.
They inject it into their face after the baby's born?
Or do a lot of things with it. People store it.
They can store it for the baby.
You can store it
they get
for
sick.
the baby, or you can store it for siblings.
Interesting.
Placenta is very rich in those types of, so people freeze their placenta and make shakes out of it and do all sorts of stuff.
Does that really work?
I have no idea.
I heard of people eating it, and I'm like, oh my God, what is going on here?
Yeah, I don't know.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it's not my It's not a that's not a tree I usually bark up, but people do.
That's
People
incredible though to think
Yeah.
about. I actually was I went and got like a facial thing, some laser, right? And I was handed this product, and it was called Factor 5. And on the bottom it said contains human stem cells. They get them from like eggs in China. So some of these companies are already doing it. And then my other facialist said, no, they genetically modify them from plant stem cells. And I'm like, then why don't they say plant stem cells? It says human stem cells right on the bottle.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's a lot of stem cell research happening. I mean, I'm certainly not a stem cell specialist, but but the next era of medicine and disease cures and cancer cures are all really going to be stem cell based. So, I mean, it is the future of medicine, and genetically modifying genes to help cure disease and cure cancer. I mean, that's the forefront of that's the things that hopefully our children and grandchildren will have.
Right, because we can prevent a lot of the stuff that's kind of going on. I have my grandma's sister. She got married to a man, obviously when she was like right out of high school, because that was the thing. And because they didn't do testing, their children, the chromosomes were messed up in some of them, which led to five or six of them actually having schizophrenia. So these were like my dad's cousins, and they did all this research on it. But we wouldn't see that happen today because of the testing, or somehow their bodies did not go together.
Schizophrenia is a little bit different. Any of the mental health disorders are a little bit different because we haven't perfected or completely identified the genes that lead to a lot of the mental health disorders, including things like autism.
Right.
We've gotten much better at some. I'm sure people are working on it, but we've gotten very good at identifying other diseases through genetics. So, like right now, for example, a very standard thing that couples will do, whether they're trying to conceive naturally or going through egg freezing or going through IVF, doesn't matter, is do genetic screening. So you can screen for about 283 diseases to see if you're a carrier, and then your partner or sperm donor or egg donor can also be tested. And then if a couple ends up being a perfect match for the same disease, then you can actually do genetic testing on the embryo to make sure you implant an embryo that is not affected.
But if you get pregnant naturally, there's no way to control that, obviously.
If you get pregnant naturally, then you can test at the early parts of the pregnancy, between the 10th and 13th week. You can have a test called the CVS. It's kind of like an amniocentesis. Where you can actually genetically test the fetus.
Gotcha.
But you're only like 10 weeks pregnant. And then in the event that you find out that it's affected, then a couple can choose to have an abortion or a termination of pregnancy. So that's real. So you can do that through a natural conception. Through IVF, we do that testing before we put the embryo back inside of you.
Which is better, because then you don't have to make that horrific decision that nobody ever wants to make.
Precisely. Or you can know beforehand that you're both carriers or that you're not carriers. And I mean, there's some things that we can't control for. There are some things we can control for. But genetic testing that has occurred now that people can do during pregnancy, is changing the face. People are now have the option of knowing beforehand that their child is affected with a disease. And whether or not they decide to continue the pregnancy, you can at least be aware of what you're going to be dealing with once.
100%.
And there's a lot of ethical, there's people who are very upset that that type of genetic testing is reducing the number of people born with Down syndrome. It's kind of a catch-22.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's really fascinating. If you really take away the layers of the onion, what might seem just in the very surface, pretty easy, or at least in my opinion. You have a fetus affected with Down syndrome, many people would choose to terminate. But the reality is some people don't agree with that and
Right.
And
it's a tough decision.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine going through that decision.
No.
Like, I don't know what my answer would be right now.
Exactly. And so that's why I think the more, and it brings us back to what we started this conversation about, is just empowering people with the knowledge.
Yes.
You know, so a lot of the things we talked about right now are not standard table conversation, clearly.
No, absolutely not.
But it's all pretty basic stuff that you can learn if you have a
Yeah.
fertility assessment and just sit down with a doctor and talk about, okay, I'm planning on getting pregnant. What do I need to know? And these are pretty standard things that can be tested.
So the other thing is, because this is all very new medicine, I don't know if it was you or another person at the KindBody that told me this, but the oldest living IVF person is only 42 years old.
I'm not sure how old she is, but I know
But it's a girl.
it's a woman. I don't know how old she is.
Interesting.
I don't know how old she is.
But
That would make sense because 40 years ago would be the 1970s.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
That makes sense.
Because, and what's so crazy also is you don't think it's, because we don't know, like, is a lifespan of something that's done through IVF, is it less? Is it more? Is it?
There has been no, because
don't-
there's been no studies to show, though, that in any way adversely affects IQ, adversely affects risk of cancer, adversely affects
Right, okay.
longevity, any of that.
So they're just created a little differently, but it's still
Yeah, because I mean, at the end of the day, an egg and a sperm create an embryo, and then the embryo
Right.
grows. I mean, we're mimicking what happens in the body. We're not like making some new human
Right,
that's
yeah,
made out
that's
of.
true.
It's not like an almond milk.
Wait, when
Do you see what I mean? It's not like
Yeah.
a genetically engineered egg. It's still from the human. So all we're doing is facilitating the meeting of the egg and sperm.
Yes.
Right. So it's not like we're making genetically modified eggs or genetically modified sperm, and this is not actually a human. It's some chemical process.
Right.
So I think that's why we feel so strongly that there is no bad sequelae.
Okay. And is there, do you think that in the near future we will have gestation banks? Like in a machine versus having a surrogate?
No, that's like sci-fi movies. No, nothing is a perfect substitute for the womb. It's really incredible. Yeah.
Right. So there's not going to be like
No, I think we'll have transplants, which they're actually working on, like transplanting uteruses to like men who do sex changes and.
Oh wow! Has that been done yet?
That'll happen much more. That'll happen before. Yeah, before like you have these sci-fi movies where there's people growing and no, because the human body is uniquely special, and even that's why at the end of the day, you know, when women who freeze their eggs, I hope you freeze your eggs and you never need to use them. I hope you are able to conceive naturally on your own when you're ready.
Yes.
Because nothing at the end of the day, as wonderful as our science may be, nothing is the perfect substitute for a naturally conceived baby.
Okay.
And so no, we're not going to be growing babies in dishes to like the full term, because the human body is really miraculous. What happens in the body, the changes that occur, the placenta. You know,
and there's that connection too with the mother and the baby
but the placenta, the way the blood flows, the filtration system, it's really incredible.
It's almost something you can never mimic.
No.
Wouldn't that be crazy?
Yeah.
And maybe not in our lifetimes, but maybe in another. That would be a little crazy. I could just picture it right now. It'd be like a line and there would just be a bunch of there'd just be a bunch of like ovals.
Yeah.
And then you would just see babies growing in this water. I mean, that's creepy.
Yeah, no.
That's a movie right there.
There you go.
But I still can't believe, I mean, we covered so much on this, but I still can't believe that the turkey baster thing is not just people being funny and some sort of joke. Legit.
It's a very common thing, particularly used in same-sex female couples.
So you should get a new turkey baster, not the one you did your Thanksgiving turkey with.
Right, it's right after Thanksgiving too, yeah. Although you could argue, I mean, the vagina is not a sterile place, so.
Yeah, that's true, I guess, right? Not crazy?
Yeah.
Oh my God. That's just so amazing. Like every time, I'm never going to be able to look at a turkey baster ever the same.
Ever again. Yeah.
That's amazing. So tell us, before we wrap up, tell us more about KindBody, because what I really liked about this place was it didn't feel like a hospital and it didn't feel like a doctor's office, because that is the worst feeling. You feel like something's like you're sick if you're going into this. This was like a spa.
Yeah, a lot of people.
It really was.
People actually come to our office.
It's called KindBody, so you guys know.
Say, can I get my nails done here? And maybe we should add that service.
Yeah.
So KindBody is building a national network of women's health practices. Our specialty is women's health and fertility. Mm-hmm. So we do the entire spectrum of gynecologic care, from pap smears and contraception and IUDs and breast exams, all the routine things you would do at your GYN. And then we also have the entire array of fertility care, so including fertility assessments, egg freezing, IVF, intrauterine insemination, same-sex couples, women who want to achieve pregnancy on their own as a single mom, and kind of everything in between. We take care of men and women who are transitioning and wish to freeze eggs prior to making the transition. And so it really goes through a broad spectrum of people that we take care of. And our mission is to improve access, both in information, which is what we're doing today.
Yes.
But also in reducing costs, because we don't think that this is something that should only be affordable to people in the top 1%. So our costs, our prices are significantly lower than most places, so that you can have a cycle of egg freezing through KindBody is $6,500. And like I said, there's places in New York today that charge you $17,000.
Which is crazy.
Our IVF prices are also significantly lower at around $14,000. And that's significantly lower. And when you think about this process and how important it is for men and women and for families and for future families, it really deserves to be affordable. But also our missions are to destigmatize fertility care. It's often something that's talked about behind closed doors.
Yes.
And very hush-hush. And we think it's an area that really, the more we talk about it, the less scary it becomes. Mm-hmm. And we really want to end the fragmentation that exists, because as women, you kind of go to one place to get your pap smear, you go to another place if you're trying to get pregnant, you go to another place if you want to freeze your eggs, you go to another place. And in between, no one's really taking care of your emotional health. No one's taking care of your whole body.
Yes.
And so that's why on our team we have therapists, we have nutritionists, we have gynecologists, we have reproductive endocrinologists. So we have the entire team under one roof.
Yes.
Because we recognize that as women go through this journey, you may need to have some emotional support. You may need to have nutritional support. You may just need to have a pap smear followed up, so that we want to take care of the whole woman, not just her ovaries and vagina.
Right.
And we also want it to be a place that you want to go. We always say we want to provide care that we as women would want to receive ourselves.
Yeah.
And there's no reason why a doctor's office has to be gross.
Right.
Which many of them are. I mean,
it's very sterile. Yeah. And the lighting's terrible.
Exactly. And, we're our locations, so we're open in New York, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. And our locations are retail level. You walk in off the street.
They're beautiful.
And we purposefully make them beautiful and light and pretty colors.
Yeah.
We pride ourselves in clinical excellence, but we think there's a softer touch.
Yes.
And a nicer approach. Because at the end of the day, you're a healthy woman. Like, you're not sick.
Right.
And you're choosing to be preventative and be empowered. And if you're making all of those choices, then why not also have it in a nice environment?
Exactly. And it was easy. I mean, there was a lot of testing that was done. But the one thing I really want to hit on with not only being affordable, but you guys also have an interest-free payment plan.
Yeah.
Which is so key, because for me, at the moment, like, I didn't want to throw that much money down on my credit card or pay it out of my bank. Like, to have that interest-free 3-year payment plan was something that is so key. and made it super affordable.
Right.
And is the only reason I could do it right now.
Exactly. So it's $200 a month for 36 months.
Yeah.
You're not paying any interest. If you want to pay quicker, or you can.
Yeah.
And during that 36 months, you're paying just for the storage, and you're not paying anything extra. And that was really key to us when we founded the company, because we recognize, yes, $6,000 is significantly less than $17,000, but let's just be real, it's still $6,000.
Of course.
And so it was really important to us to make sure that it was affordable for everyone. And and I don't want to. There might be some people where $200 a month is still not feasible, and I recognize that.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a step in the right direction.
I agree, and I think it's just going to get better. And what you've done is great. And I don't know if I hadn't come across you guys if I would have done it. So I'm happy I did. It was kind of weird how things happen.
Yeah,
when they're
I
meant to
remember
be.
the day I met you. You were like there for a meeting.
I was so panicked, and I thought I was going to literally have a panic attack. And I'm like, oh my God.
And look at you now. Your needle phobia is gone. And you made an investment in your future.
I did.
And we'll see where life takes you. But I think it definitely is meant to be empowering and at the very least informative.
So, okay, and they can go on KindBody.com.
Yep, you can make appointments online. All our pricing is online.
Okay.
One of our big things is being fully transparent. You can chat with us online. You can email us. You can call us. But imagine this, we're the only fertility clinic in the entire country where you can make an appointment online.
That's great. So yeah, you guys, KindBody.com. If you want information, if you want egg freezing, you can reach out to me at our email at contact@nexttomadison.com. And I'm happy to answer any questions as I've gone through this. And if I have questions that I cannot answer, I'm going to pass them on to Dr. Sasan. So, well, thank you so much for being here. This was so fun and informative, and I hope that we help some people that are listening, and it's going to be great.
Yeah, it was my pleasure, and thank you for trusting us with your body.
You're welcome. Mm-hmm. I know, right? I was like, whoa, it's crazy. All right, you guys. Well, thanks again for tuning into another episode of Next to Madison, and we'll see you next time to find out who's next. Hi, your host, Madison Malloy here. I just wanted to remind you guys to please follow the show on social media at Next to Madison. And if you have any questions or suggestions for the show, or you feel that you would be a great guest on the show and would love to be considered, please feel free to email me at nexttomadison@gmail.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on all podcast platforms. And I thank you again for listening.